The next day at work, I felt almost invigorated. I actually felt like going for a jog for the first time since middle school. But it was early and I was worried about being eviscerated. The conversation with Chris was both better and worse than I expected. I guess I can't really expect the guy to tell me, "Don't worry, it's just a junkie prank." The pier where he asked to meet me was located at the Fort Lauderdale Beach Park, an area about 40 minutes south of my location on I-95. It was a nice area to live, but it bordered Sunrise and Hialeah, which are extremely low-income, diverse neighborhoods. When people are being polite, they call them colorful, which is technically, as well as figuratively, accurate, as the homes and businesses in the area tend to be painted a shocking variety of colors, all muted by the grime of South Florida. Part of me was actually looking forward to it. The meeting spot was in Fort Lauderdale, at the beach park there, but I was looking forward to getting mofongo for dinner in Hialeah because of the proximity to a particularly incredible restaurant, El Reconocido de Santa Barbara. The other part of me was focusing on the mofongo just so that I wouldn't have to think about what the meeting was about. Since Christmas, I had spent my time listening to every single neurotic patient story I possibly could. 99% of them were about some other junkie who stole from them or performed some kind of miracle of getting drugs or money. Every once in a while, however, I would hear mumbling about someone disappearing or the cops acting strange. And I wondered if it was just the hazard of the trade or something else. Something horribly wrong. Because I had been getting paid to sit around at George's and do drugs, I was placed at the front desk when I got back. My job was essentially pointless anyways, so I didn't argue with Dave when he called and told me. That morning, a couple of junkies brought in a kid again. It wasn't every day this happened, but it did happen, and even the drug dealers were usually disgusted, or at least they acted that way. Scum like us usually get uppity at child abuse, so that we can tell ourselves, well, at least we're not like those animals. The woman could have been anywhere between her mid-30s to late 50s. She had bleached blonde hair that looked like it had been scorched by chemicals one too many times. It had an orange tinge that matched her cheetah print lined jacket over a fuchsia and black tropical print shirt, which must have been the most colorful thing at her local Walmart, and black skin-tight leggings. Her skin looked like leather, and I instantly felt horrible for her. She looked more miserable than most patients. Her boyfriend, and/or pimp, walked next to her, chewing tobacco and wearing a black trucker hat to match his badly receding, oily black hair. His age was also ambiguous, but the fact that he walked in with a can of Bud Light that he was drinking, after putting his cigarette out on the door, told me that he was typical Appalachian white trash. The act of drinking beer and chewing tobacco at the same time was horrific alone. He wore a wife-beater that had been stained horrifically in the pits, and jeans that looked like they had more mass from pure body odor than denim. Both had track marks running up their arms that looked like river maps. There was clearly a pack of beer or malt liquor in her purse. All of this was absolutely normal, everyday stuff. We serve people like that all day, giving them absurd amounts of painkillers to go home with. But this case was special, because the little girl who stood between them looked like an image from a movie. She couldn't have been more than 6 or 7, and was wearing a bright pink shirt with a cartoon character on it, and bright blue jeans, which were framed by her long, tangled blonde hair. Aside from the fact that she had clearly been crying, with puffy red eyes, she looked like she had all the health her parents clearly didn't. "I need my appointment," the shithead muttered angrily, in a dialect of hick that sounded almost like Boomhauer. He sounded as if he was pissed off that I didn't greet him by name. "I am sorry, sir?" I responded in my best English, and planned on continuing to ask him to repronounce the sentence endlessly until I could ask Aaron and his goon friend to remove them. "My name is Melissa Rogers, and this is Cliff Rogers." The tired woman motioned to her husband. "We came in last month on the same day. We have an appointment in an hour. We'd like to check in, please." She was clearly accustomed to both Cliff's douchebaggery and the douchebaggery that I was prepared to respond with. I was mildly disappointed, but confident that old Cliffy would give me another opportunity, so I beamed a smile at her and got their charts. When I came back, I heard the girl sobbing and saw her little hand reaching up, as if attempting to drag her mother down. "What if he comes back?" she asked the air above her. "Shut the fuck up," Cliff responded flatly. I was going to be keeping this guy's file. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it, but I instinctively hated him enough for it to involve law enforcement. Also, that little girl needed out of here. In my head, my drug-besotted memory strained for anything related to Child Protective Services. They got their papers and sat in the waiting room. The little girl sitting next to a giant fat man in tattered camouflage clothes, drinking a big gulp. The giant fat man barely came out of his opiate-induced trance when she began to cry quietly again, while staring at her feet. Neither of her parents looked over or made a noise until 40 minutes later, when they were called into the hallway that served as a second waiting room, right before the patients went to see the doctor. The charts were set up so that the doctor they went to see was random, if the one they saw last time wasn't there, but they usually saw the same doctor. Not as if continuity of care mattered. We just put the folders into slots next to the door, and the doctor would take whichever folder came next, call the patient, and ask them to describe their symptoms, while writing their names into prescriptions that were pre-stamped with what they were getting, regardless of who they were. I decided Cliff could skip ahead of a gentleman who had been slumped into one of the chairs, eyelids shut and drool flowing, for well over an hour. Aaron met some attractive young ladies, and they ended up skipping him in line as well, just before the Rogers family showed up. Cliff was called into the office of Dr. Beschers almost right away. I decided to be as close to direct as I possibly could, without getting another phone call from George. "I hate to bother you, ma'am, but I overheard your daughter saying something about someone bothering you. Would it happen to be a strange man? We've had a lot of problems with someone who just isn't normal." I said it with the same tone and inflection that a customer service agent would use, as if I was just performing a professional courtesy. She moved her daughter just slightly closer, and gave both of us a concerned look before glancing at the door her husband had walked through. I made it look like I was looking for a specific file, so that I didn't seem too interested in her response. She coughed a loose piece of phlegm into her tall boy before speaking. "We drive down here." She gulped hard. "And he wanted to stay at this motel with his friends and all, but they pissed at him and we couldn't afford it. He wasn't having any of it when he asked the clerk if we could sleep in the parking lot, so we went to the beach to sleep there, because we never had a problem with that in Hilton Head or driving through Georgia when we came." She pronounced Georgia, Georgia, and it almost sounded pretty. She stared down at her feet and then over to her little girl, who was watching her closely with concern. "When we started to sleep, there was a man there. He knocked on the window and told us to leave, but he wasn't no cop or nothing. He looked real funny. He was just a kid and dressed like a hippie or something. So Cliff told him to go fuck himself and that he'd beat his ass if he came around again." She clearly sounded very proud of the fucking idiot. She stared at her feet before swallowing deeply again, and continuing, this time while looking at her little girl while talking. "That kid said we needed to leave her there, or else. He said that we wouldn't have no trouble if we just left her there and went on our way. He's smiling like it was no different than saying, "How do you do?" He started creeping me out, so I told Cliff to just go, and we would find some other place. But when we tried to leave, that man started to holler. In his mouth. She turned from her little girl and leaned in closely to me. She glanced around quickly, as if someone could have entered the small crypt-like hallway without her knowing. His mouth got real big, and his jaw popped down. She whispered with intensity. "What do you mean, popped down?" "Well, we used to have this snake and all, and when it ate, its jaw would pop down so it could fit a whole rat or whatever in there. His jaw popped down. When he started yelling, it did the same thing and just popped down. And even when we were turning away in a big truck, he started running at us. And we looked out the mirror and we saw more people coming, so we thought maybe someone called the police. But they was running too. I heard glass break behind us and saw some kid behind us. I told Cliff to go, but he just kept looking at this man, and this man's face just started to open up. And I slapped him, 'cause I was scared. And then he finally hit the gas and get the fuck out of there. We heard screaming so loud, and it didn't even sound like people. It sounded like cats in heat, but angrier. It all rushed out in what sounded like a single breath. A massive, run-on sentence that took me a moment to decipher. She looked exasperated now, and it was clear that she had been more stressed than usual from this particular run. We pull into a police station. Even Cliff was scared, and he ain't never scared. An officer talked to us real quick and said we could sleep the night there. Cliff told him we was going to relatives tomorrow and couldn't afford a hotel. We looked, and there were scratch marks on the back of the car, and something sharp was dug all the way into the trunk. It was a hooked thing. Looked like a cat's claw, but without the cat. Whatever the fuck it was, it broke our brake light, and the cops said we'd have to get that fixed. She said this as if the car repair was the worst part of the story, and it took me a moment to restrain a chuckle. To most of these people, a small car hiccup could mean the difference between having a roof over their head and having to desperately call relatives and friends for a bedroom. "I don't want to come down here no more." The little girl said this matter-of-factly, as her mother ran her fingers through her hair. Her mother looked at me pleadingly. "You ever hear that shit before?" she asked with genuine fear. "Yeah, don't sleep near the beaches, or near tourist traps. Only sleep in places people go, especially if they're going to clinics, even if it's a bad neighborhood. Go straight up I-95 and don't pull off any exits you don't hear about other people going down." They seemed like shitty parents, but they were probably better than whatever the fuck that thing was. The woman wiped a bit of moisture from her eye. We stopped at the motel the next day, and Cliff apologized and stuff. But when we stayed the night, she kept trying to leave. She won't tell me why. She gripped her child fiercely and looked at me with pleading and concern, and I could see the obsessed veins spreading from her fingers. Even there, she had injected heavily. I felt emotionally uncomfortable and had no way to reconcile my loathing and sympathy, both for her and for myself, for giving her the drugs that were about to fuck up that little girl's life even more. I ended the conversation politely and told her she should be all right, then went to the bathroom and Googled the Child Protective Services process before calling them and letting them know Cliff had some issues to work out. Sometime later, I would get a phone call from a sheriff in Eustis, a small town relatively close to Orlando. The parents never made it home. A quick Google search revealed that Cliff was found near an abandoned tourist trap, and that authorities were desperately searching for the remains of his wife, but were still holding out hope for the child, whose name, I only then learned, was Daisy Rogers. I would sit and wonder for a moment why they knew the wife was dead, but were still searching before deciding to get very drunk on that particular night. The rest of that day, however, went smoother than usual. There was a junkie fight. An old lady pretended to be crippled and got up and started screaming at the doctor when she found out she wouldn't get more meds. And someone covered the bathroom in feces and urine. There were plenty of offers from patients to clean it, all of them excited at the disgusting possibility of earning up to $100, which Aaron decided to award to a yokel in a NASCAR cap, who was deeply grateful. Towards the end of the day, I started to move amongst the patients while pretending to clean the impossibly disgusting sitting room once there was no one left to check in. I overheard the usual junkie chatter, mainly complaints about doctors and other clinics they were getting drugs from, or people asking how much their ringleader was letting each other keep to see if they were getting a fair deal. A fat guy in a wrestling t-shirt and a thoroughly disgusted young girl wearing purple shorts and a green tank top were negotiating how much dilaudid she would get for a blowjob. Someone else was talking about a dead friend, but sure enough, it was just another overdose. Two young guys were talking about some place in Miami, though, and it only got my attention in case I needed to remember it later. A kid with dusky blonde hair and a heavy metal band t-shirt, with blue lightning everywhere, sat against the wall next to the nearly destroyed drink vending machine that had chewing tobacco spat across what was left of its plastic facade, near the hallway that led to the bathroom. He was chatting with a shorter kid with black hair and glasses that had been taped together, who was wearing blue jeans and a camouflage t-shirt with a local hunting gear company in Ohio's logo and address. Dude, it was fucking incredible. He got like 6 bags of it for free. The blonde kid practically yelped at his black-haired friend. And he said they had plenty more. We could get jobs and move to Miami. Blondie seemed thrilled, but his friend had a look of concern on his face. I ain't never heard of ephemera. If it was so good and it's free, why ain't it everywhere? He pronounced the name of the drug, ephemera, with some derision. I had heard some mention of ephemera before, and was under the impression that it was a cocktail of hallucinogens. I had initially written it off because of the amount of people messing with those in Miami. And he ain't answering his phone no more, or on Facebook. We don't know what he up to or where he is. He could have got played easy. Been a patsy for somebody. We don't know nobody down there anyhow. He seemed concerned, and they both were becoming aware that I was listening to them, so I decided to enter the conversation. Excuse me, gentlemen. I couldn't help but overhear your story, and I had a friend who liked that ephemera stuff a lot as well, but he just fell off the face of the earth after inviting me to party with him. Do you know anything about where to get the stuff? With anyone else, they probably wouldn't have said shit, but I was a thoroughly respected connoisseur of narcotics, and indeed, all things junk. They looked at each other, and the kid with the glasses nodded to me as if he knew me and thought I was cool. It was kind of weird being a sort of micro-celebrity, but only with people I hated deeply. The blonde kid was excited for an opportunity to share his enthusiasm for the drug. Well, our friend from school, Kyle, he told us about this place in Miami. It's a club like. He grinned and nodded at the word club, and I nodded back. He had probably only seen real nightclubs in movies, and even those weren't as packed filled with beautiful people and loud music as some of the ones in Miami. And they have this ephemera stuff, and it's just like free, and it's everywhere. I tried some and tripped balls for a whole day. I saw some weird shit, man. For real. He was using his hands to express every word. This was clearly a thrilling prospect for him. His friend looked more sour, however. I ain't never heard of this shit before, and I hear of everything. And Kyle, he stopped calling and deleted his Facebook. Even his mom and them getting worried. And his mom know every dealer in Florida and ain't never heard of no Evmra before. But Cassie, his cousin's baby mama, she said her friend went looking for it, and when Cassie tried to talk to her, she just kept smiling like and tried to get her to stay down here for it. The family networks these people had were as absurd as the people in them. He began to look legitimately concerned and stared down at his feet. She said her friend wouldn't stop smiling. Ear to ear, she said. She wasn't acting right and had a bunch of friends try and give her more of the stuff. Who the fuck gives out free drugs? Not like they usually need a lot of advertising, especially if they in a nice club and shit. And why they only got it in one club all specific like. It just don't make no sense. I nodded to the kid with the broken glasses and slowly walked away. I think they got the impression that I thought he was right to be cautious, because they looked at each other and the kid with glasses gave Blondie a "I told you so" look. The drive out of work was confusing. For a moment, I thought I was going to my old home, but I forced myself to continue on I-95, past the boundaries of my normal daily existence. I was heading to the Fort Lauderdale Beach Park, a large sprawl of water-based family fun near Hialeah, where I remembered my favorite restaurant was. Like much of Florida, the urban sprawl is composed of small homes and occasional apartment complexes. Homes built in the 1920s aren't as rare as you think, and they litter the area near the waterfront in various stages of repair. They're just slightly taller than modern single-floor buildings, and in Florida, sometimes still have a shotgun layout, with a large central hall dividing groups of rooms. Their windows always have at least one example of a series of horizontal stripes of glass that can be opened and separated to allow the air to flow through. They usually sport pastel or tropical colors, and are terrible to live in. In wealthier areas, they renovate them and sell them for absurd sums. In poor areas, like Fort Lauderdale, and especially Hialeah, they usually show their age, and in sunrise, most of them look like they might fall down. It looked like they were fighting amidst the cheaper, blander constructions of the 80s through 90s, and somehow winning. With the newer facades that tended to be fixed to concrete block homes coming apart here and there in more obvious ways, like peeling fake wood. Every now and then, a mission-style home or building used as a church dotted the landscape. Strange bits of Spanish design that somehow never looked out of place next to the old homes. The sunset was an explosion of dark reds and burned oranges, alight with flickers of turquoise, purple, and soft white clouds. An incredible scene that lurked over and behind every building, turning most of them into dark pastel silhouettes. I pulled into the park about 10 minutes past the time I was supposed to be there, and saw only a tall, well-dressed black guy facing one of the piers, away from the parking lot. I briefly remembered an urban legend about things that wait for people near waterways with their backs to the land, but shook it off and approached the man. He was wearing a light blue linen shirt with spotless white linen pants, with a black belt and matching shoes, both with blue accents. His hair was somewhere between dark blue and indigo on one side, and faded seamlessly into a perfect bleached white color. It was the first time I had seen anyone take that much care of their appearance in a long time, and I was taken aback for just a moment, even more so than when I spoke to police or other people who might arrest me. The motherfucker looked like he just walked out of a music video. I was very impressed with his Floridianness. "Excuse me, Chris?" He turned around and smiled wearily. He wore thick-framed black glasses that made him look gracefully pretentious. "I'd say it's a pleasure to meet you, but I'd rather it be under any different circumstances." By the look on his face, probably not at all. I occasionally forgot that I was a disgusting-looking junkie that rarely shaved and probably smelled like shit, but this guy's appearance really made me a lot more aware. Yeah, I think we have some experiences in common. I looked around the park again to make sure no one else was there. I couldn't see anyone, and he walked closer to me. Did you tell whoever you work for where you were going? He had a look of deep concern. The question startled me. No, But they do know what's going on, don't they? He asked, cutting me off. I had no idea what to say. They sent me to make a drop near the beach. There was something there. One of them killed one when it came to his house, so they can't not know. But I don't know what they do know, or how much of this shit is connected. As I was speaking, I was slowly becoming more aware of the fact that I didn't know this guy at all, but that we were jumping into a pretty fucking weird conversation. His face didn't look surprised at all, though, so I guess that we were both talking about the same thing. The other thing I started to realize was that I had no idea how many of the urban legends and weird stories were based on truth, and out of those, which ones were connected or the same things. I looked online. I think they're called stigini by Indians and stuff. I realized that I now sounded as desperate and ignorant as the junkies I had previously listened to. I wondered how many of them edited out the crazier parts of their stories. I think you may be right. At the very least, something got 3 of my friends, and most of what it did fit the description of a monster from pre-Seminole Florida. The Ishkini, or Stigini. He was about to go on, but I had to cut him off. How did you know I worked for someone? I asked pointedly. Grace, Alyssa. They both ran drugs for money. Cops don't arrest a lot of cute girls. I think whoever they were working for got them killed, and I think they did it on purpose. I felt the ground go loose beneath me, and my legs buckle just a little. A cold shock went up my spine, even though I should not have been surprised. We walked to the bench where I described in detail what I had seen, and then decided that we should get dinner. Or rather, I should. He had apparently eaten, which somehow stopped him from eating more. Before continuing the conversation.